Some women give birth once, others give birth twice, once from their womb and once from their silence. The brass band blares a triumphant march, but it sounds like nails scraping glass to me. A sea of proud families floods the stadium holding signs, flowers, flags. Everyone's here for someone in uniform. Everyone's cheering for a son, a daughter, a sibling, a hero. And I'm here too. Row 17, seat 44, right on the aisle. My hands grip my purse tight in my lap, not for the usual reasons a mother might hold her bag tightly like tissues or a phone. Mine holds a letter I've never sent, and a photo I haven't looked at in years, and something else. Something small and sterile and sealed. Something he doesn't know I gave him. My son marches past with his company perfectly in step. His posture is impeccable, his eyes sharp. Lieutenant Thomas Avery, age 25. He doesn't glance left or right, not even toward me. But I see them, his father and stepmother, sitting up front like they won a prize. Matching navy suits, white teeth. His father stands up to clap harder than anyone, chest puffed, like he was the one who survived the field training, the bone fractures, the mental walls. That man couldn't survive 2 days in a studio apartment with a colicky baby and no heating. I did. Thomas doesn't look up as he passes my row. He doesn't know, or maybe pretends not to know I'm here. I'm the ghost in the back of the theater. The name's scratched off the playbill, but I see him, and I see something else. His gait favors the left side just slightly. Most wouldn't catch it, but I know that limp. I know where the scar is, just under his ribs from the accident 2 years ago. The one no one told me about until it was nearly too late. He doesn't know I was there at the hospital. He doesn't know I gave him the one thing no one else could. And I promised never to tell. The wind picks up, catching the edges of the programs fluttering in people's hands. The announcer calls each cadet by name. I whisper along. When they say Lieutenant Thomas Avery, I don't clap. I don't stand. I just breathe. He salutes, the general receives his diploma and walks off the stage into his next life. The crowd roars. I sit down slowly. My knees hurt. My eyes sting. There are no photos of us together from this day. But I brought one, an old one. The day he took his first steps. His hands reaching for me, gurgling with laughter, falling into my arms. He doesn't remember that. And maybe he doesn't want to. As the ceremony ends, people pour out like a river breaking through a dam. I wait. I always wait. That's what mothers like me do. I don't want a picture. I don't want applause. I just want to make sure he's breathing, walking, living. And then I'll leave. But just before I turn away, I see it, him embracing his stepmother, thanking his father. He looks right through me. And I disappear again. I remember the exact moment I lost him. Not physically, no, that came later. I'm talking about the slow, invisible unraveling. The kind that starts with a sentence and ends with silence. He was 17. His voice had dropped, but the boyishness lingered in his eyes. He had just started driving, already better at it than I ever was. He was good at everything: math, running, fixing things with a butter knife and duct tape. God, he was clever. That afternoon, he came home from his father's house with a new phone, new jacket, and a strange expression I couldn't name. I asked how the weekend went. He looked at me like I was a mosquito buzzing in his ear. He says, "You held me back." He mumbled, eyes glued to his screen. That's why we're not ahead in life. The words sliced. Not just because they were cruel, but because they didn't sound like him. They sounded like his father. I didn't say anything. What would I even say? Your father left when you were 4. I worked double shifts at the diner and still read you Good Night Moon with different voices. I sold my grandmother's bracelet so you could go to that science camp. I made birthday cakes out of pancake mix. I stitched your school uniform when the seams gave out. I could have said all that, but I didn't. Instead, I said, Did you eat lunch? He rolled his eyes and went to his room. That was the beginning of the end. By the time he turned 18, he'd already begun calling his stepmother Mom in Christmas cards. His father had remarried, moved into a house with a pool, and suddenly I was the one in the shadows. The one with peeling wallpaper water stains on the ceiling and a fridge that moaned louder than it cooled. We fought. Oh, we did. He called me dramatic, clingy, said I was holding him emotionally hostage. His words weren't his, they were phrases he learned from someone else. I could tell by how stiff they sounded coming out of his mouth. The last time we spoke, really spoke, I told him I loved him. He told me I need space. Space turned into years. I sent texts, holiday cards, even knitted a scarf once and mailed it anonymously. He never wrote back. But I kept a drawer with every report card, every drawing he made as a kid, and every photo I dared to print. I don't know why. Maybe because somewhere deep down I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Then came the call. A blocked number. A curt, professional voice. Mrs. Avery, your son Thomas is in emergency surgery at Fort Benning. We need an organ donor. You're a match. They had called me by mistake. I wasn't listed as next of kin anymore. But I was still the one they needed. I didn't hesitate. I didn't ask to speak to him. I didn't ask what happened or who else they'd tried. I just said, tell me where to go. They flew me out under medical anonymity. No name, no record. Standard in military donor cases if requested. And apparently his stepmother didn't want him burdened by emotional distractions. So they had me sign a waiver. I'd get no credit. He'd never know. The surgeon asked me one last time before I went under. Are you sure? I looked at him, eyes glassy with anesthesia and grief, and whispered, he's still my son. They took a piece of me from under my ribs. The scar healed. But the silence didn't. He survived. And I went back to my little house with the leaky faucet and the creaky floorboards, and I lived with the knowledge that my son walked around this world with part of me inside him. And he didn't even know. I didn't tell anyone. Not my sister, not my neighbor who sometimes watched my cat, not even the woman at the diner who always remembered I took my coffee with milk, no sugar. What would I say? Oh hey, my son needed a kidney and I gave him mine, but he hasn't spoken to me in 4 years and doesn't know it was me who saved his life. Right. That would go over well. So instead, I lived my quiet life, the life I had learned to shrink into. I went back to work part-time at the library. I watered my plants. I kept an extra blanket on the couch in case I ever had a visitor, which I didn't. At night, I'd touch the scar on my side. It wasn't long, maybe 5 inches, but it felt bigger than it looked. Like a wound across time. I remember waking up in the recovery room groggy and alone. The nurse was kind. She brought me ice chips and squeezed my hand without asking why I was crying. I don't think she needed to. After I was discharged, they arranged a quiet transport home. No pomp, no ceremony, no thank you. But I got updates. Not from him, never from him, but from the little internet rabbit holes I learned to dig. Articles, press releases, a promotion here, a training course there. Lieutenant Thomas Avery was climbing. Sharp jawline, square shoulders, medals shining like the sun he never looked up at. He looked strong. He looked alive. I'd watch his speeches in the background while folding laundry, pretending it was just noise. But I memorized every word. He was articulate, proud. Always thanking his team, his fellow officers, even his dog, but never his mother. One time he posted a photo in uniform standing at attention American flag rippling behind him. The caption read, "Strength doesn't come from what you've been given, it comes from what you earn." I sat on the edge of my bed and laughed until I cried. What did he think that kidney was, a gift bag? But no, I didn't post anything. Didn't like it. Didn't comment. Just saved the photo to a folder named Tom. I started sending care packages. Anonymously, of course. Protein bars, foot powder, handwritten notes signed "A Proud Supporter." I never said anything too emotional. Just things like "Stay warm out there," or "Hope this reminds you of home." Whatever that meant to him now. He never responded. But once, just once, he posted a photo holding up one of the mugs I'd sent. A plain ceramic thing with the words, "You are not alone," etched in fading ink. I stared at that post for an hour. No caption. Just a quiet smile I hadn't seen on his face since he was 10 years old. I printed that one too. It's on my fridge now, next to a picture of him dressed as a firefighter for Halloween. Then the news broke. Thomas Avery was being honored for valor rescuing 2 wounded soldiers under direct fire. The story ran on a military site first, then made its way to local papers. They said he carried one man over his back and dragged the other with a belt in his teeth. He dislocated his shoulder, lost a lot of blood, and still made it to the helicopter. I held the newspaper clipping in my hands like it might catch fire. Not out of fear, but reverence. He had lived. He had become everything I ever hoped and feared he'd be. Strong, brave, stubborn, mine. I made travel arrangements that night. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, didn't tell myself either. The award ceremony was held in a hangar-turned hall, all steel beams and stiff chairs, polished boots, and crisp salutes. They'd dressed it up with flags, banners, and a podium that looked far too small for the weight of the words it was about to carry. I sat in the back row again, like always, invisible, an afterthought. But I came prepared. I wore the blue dress he used to say made me look like the sky. Of course, that was back when he thought clouds were magic and not metaphors for everything I'd failed to give him. The medal was a big deal, a commendation for extraordinary valor. Only a handful received it each year. I knew his father would be there, probably claiming some share in his courage like it was genetic. I imagined him shaking hands, offering speeches, smiling for photos with that wife of his, whose hair never moved. But I didn't come for them. I came to see my son. The announcer took the mic, clearing his throat with the gravity of someone about to open a sacred scroll. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present the Military Valor Award to Lieutenant Thomas Avery." People clapped. I didn't. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I was holding my breath. He stepped up to the podium, still favoring the left side ever so slightly. He stood tall, uniform, perfect, jaw clenched. But I saw the tremble in his hand when he adjusted the mic. He began his speech with the usual thanking the chain of command, acknowledging his unit, honoring the fallen. Then he paused. A long, ragged silence. "I didn't grow up with much," he said finally. And for a long time I thought that made me less. My fingers dug into the fabric of my purse. There was someone in my life who taught me what real strength was. Not with words, but with actions. She never got medals, never had a title. But I owe her everything. The room was quiet. Even the air felt like it held still. This medal belongs to the woman who gave me life, and life again. His voice cracked, just a little. He cleared his throat, blinked fast. "If you're out there, thank you." People clapped again, louder, standing ovation. But I was already crying. He didn't know I was in the room. Didn't know I had spent every night for the past 2 years wondering if the choice to disappear had been the right one. But maybe he felt it something somewhere. Maybe love is like that. Not seen, just felt. He was ushered off the stage by senior officers, snapped into photos, saluted, hugged. I watched it all from behind a pillar, heart beating like a drum against my ribs. The press started to thin out. Family groups gathered for pictures. I knew it was my moment to leave quiet as I came. But then I saw him holding the medal in his hand, staring down at it like it was heavier than it looked. And I froze. His fingers brushed the back of the medal. His brow furrowed. I knew why. Because the inscription on the back, though unofficial, was mine. I had contacted the unit's quartermaster months ago, quietly, discreetly. Paid for the engraving myself. It read, "To the son I would give everything." Mom. He read it. His lips moved as he traced the letters. I stood motionless behind the crowd, hand covering my mouth. He looked up. And for just a second, no more, his eyes scanned the crowd like a radar, finding something it had been searching for without knowing it. Did he see me? I don't know. But I turned and walked out into the sun, tears drying on my cheeks, heart fuller than it had been in a decade. I didn't need applause. I didn't need credit. I had written my name where it mattered. 2 weeks passed. I didn't expect anything. Not a call. Not a letter. Definitely not a visit. You don't stitch together 10 years of silence with a single speech, no matter how heartfelt it sounds, under the glow of fluorescent lights and patriotic banners. That kind of silence grows its own roots. It becomes part of the foundation, like mold behind drywall, quiet, dangerous, familiar. Still, I check the mail like a schoolgirl waiting for her crush to write back. I turned the porch light on earlier than usual, kept the hallway tidy, vacuumed the welcome mat 3 times in 4 days. Ridiculous. He didn't come. But someone else did. A man in uniform, not Thomas, but one of his unit officers, arrived with a package under his arm. "Ma'am, are you Miss Avery?" I nodded. "Lieutenant Avery asked me to deliver this personally. He's currently deployed and couldn't come himself." My stomach twisted. Deployed. So soon, he'd barely healed from the last mission. I signed something I didn't read and closed the door with the kind of care you reserve for sacred moments. Inside the box was a velvet case and a letter. I opened the letter first. His handwriting was sharper than I remembered, all block letters, like he was still afraid of making a mistake. "Mom," I found out. The medal, the scar, the hospital records. Someone slipped up. I thought I knew what strength looked like. I thought it was battlefield bravery or commanding a unit. But now I know it was you all along. I don't remember the taste of your meatloaf anymore. I don't remember what bedtime stories you used to read. But I remember your eyes, and I think I see them in the mirror when I try to be brave. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I listened to Dad more than I listened to you. I'm sorry it took me this long. I don't know if you can forgive me, but I want you to know I wear your name every day now. I had the medal re-engraved. You're not invisible. Not anymore. Tom." My hand shook as I opened the case. Inside was the same medal, but the back had changed. The quartermaster's discreet script was still there. But underneath, newly added, were 4 more words I know now. TA. I held it to my chest and let out a sound I didn't know I had in me. Something between a sob and a laugh, like my soul had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. That night, I made 2 plates for dinner. Old habit, maybe. I sat at the table and laid the medal between the salt and pepper shakers like a centerpiece to a life I'd almost forgotten to hope for. And I waited. Not because I expected him to show up, but because I believed now, truly believed, that he might. 2 days later, he did. It was just after sunset. The porch light flicked on as his boots hit the steps. He was in uniform, cap in his hands, hair shorter than I'd ever seen it, and eyes wide like he couldn't believe I was real. I opened the door before he knocked. He didn't say a word, just stood there. Then slowly he knelt. Not like a soldier, like a son. He looked up at me, voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, I'm home." I couldn't speak. I didn't need to. I just opened my arms and he fell into them like no time had passed at all. Hospitals have a strange smell, clean, but not comforting, like antiseptic and unresolved fear. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead as I sit by his bedside, the quiet beeping of a monitor pulsing like a slow mechanical lullaby. This time, I'm not here by accident. This time, I'm listed. Next of kin. They called me right away, just like they should have years ago. The officer on the phone said he was stable but injured. An IED in a rural zone, broken ribs, lacerations, concussion. He's lucky, they said. 1 inch to the left and he wouldn't be breathing. Lucky. The word tastes bitter. He's asleep when I enter. Tubes and bandages everywhere. His face is pale, lips cracked. Even in this fragile state, he looks like him again. Like my boy. The one I used to carry on my hip while balancing groceries with one arm and car keys in my teeth. The one who used to wrap his arms around my neck in the middle of the night and whisper, "Don't let the monsters get me, Mama." I sit quietly and take his hand. And wait. It's early morning when his eyes flutter open. Slow, cautious, like someone waking up from more than just anesthesia, like waking from a life he didn't know he'd been sleeping through. He turns to me. No panic, no confusion. "Hi," he says, his voice hoarse. I smile. "Hi, baby." His lips tremble, not from pain, but something older, something deeper. He doesn't cry, not yet, but he squeezes my hand. "You came," he says. "I never left," I answer. There's a long pause, the kind that only happens between two people who finally ran out of reasons not to speak. I remember the scarf, he whispers, the one that came in the box with the cocoa. "I knew it was you." I didn't want to admit it, but he stops. The machines beep steadily beside him. "I was scared," he says. "Of what?" I ask softly. "Of being wrong about you." That hurts more than anything else he could have said. Not because it's cruel, but because it's honest. I nod. "I know." He closes his eyes again. His breathing is steadier now. "I'm tired of pretending," he says. "Tired of acting like I wasn't raised by the strongest woman I've ever met." Then he opens his eyes and looks straight at me. "Can I ask something?" I brace myself. "Why didn't you tell me about the kidney?" I think about lying, saying it was policy or that I was sworn to secrecy. But the truth sits heavy on my tongue, waiting its turn. "Because love doesn't demand credit," I say, "and because you wouldn't have accepted it then." He flinches, not from pain, but from the truth. I stroke his hair gently like I used to when he was small. "You needed to believe it was your strength that pulled you through," I add. "And it was. I just gave you a second chance. What you did with it, that was all you." He closes his eyes again, and this time a tear escapes down his cheek. A nurse comes in, checks his IV, then leaves us alone again. The sun outside shifts, casting gold light across the sheets. He opens his eyes one more time and looks at me with something I hadn't seen in years. Reverence. "You saved my life twice," he says. "I don't know how to repay that." "You already did," I say. "You came home." He smiles faintly. "Stay, I'll stay." He squeezes my hand tighter and we sit like that, mother and son, connected by more than blood, more than scars. Connected by silent sacrifice. And now, truth. It's been 7 months since he came home. Not just from war. From everything. He moved in with me while he recovered at first because the doctors said he needed support, but I think we both knew it was more than that. Some wounds need time. Others need witness. He needed both. The first few weeks were quiet. No awkward tension, just a reverent hush like we were relearning how to be in the same room. He'd sit on the porch with a blanket over his knees, coffee in one hand, watching the neighborhood like it was foreign territory. I'd bring him toast, smile, sit beside him. We didn't talk much, but we didn't have to. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet clink of spoons in a sink, the way you fold someone's hoodie and leave it at the foot of their bed, the soft creak of floorboards at night and knowing someone else is awake breathing. Eventually, words came back. One night, while I was making dinner, just spaghetti and salad, nothing fancy, he walked into the kitchen and said, "I don't know how to live in a world where I ignored you for 10 years. I turned the stove off. He didn't cry. He just stood there, jaw tight, like every apology he wanted to say was stuck behind his ribs. So I walked over, took his face in my hands, and said the words I had waited a decade to say. "We still have time." And we do. He goes to therapy now. He writes letters to people he served with. Sometimes he leaves little notes for me on the fridge, Gone for a run back by 9. Or, saved you the last cookie. He framed the medal. It's hanging in the living room now above the old piano I haven't played in years. The back inscription to the son I would give everything. Mom, and under it in slightly different script I know now. TA. He says it's the only award that ever felt like the truth. Last week he stood beside me at the local library, my old job, while I read a short essay for Veterans Day. It was about invisible heroes. I didn't say his name, but when I stepped down from the podium, he stood and clapped before anyone else. He tells people I saved his life, and I tell them he gave mine back. We still fight sometimes. He leaves his boots in the hallway and I nag. I hover when he drives and he groans. But there's laughter now. And that quiet understanding you only get when someone has seen the absolute worst of you and still chooses to stay. Tonight we're having dinner on the porch. There's music playing from the old speaker he fixed, and the sun is setting in that soft golden way that makes everything look gentler than it really is. He turns to me out of nowhere and says, "You know, I used to dream about someone coming to save me. Turns out it was you all along." I don't reply. Just reach for his hand across the table. Because love doesn't always need words. Sometimes love is a scar beneath your ribs, a medal on the wall, and a son coming home when no one thought he would. And sometimes love is simply this: not being invisible anymore.